Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
With that, we bring in the outstanding Bob Pompeani from Pittsburgh. Bob, how you been? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too, Steve. Appreciate it. And what a game last night, huh? 65-7, just as I thought.
Yeah, I think just about what everybody thought. Because, I mean, with all due respect to TCU, you just didn't see as a matchup that it was going to be a matchup.
No,
I didn't see it.
Georgia is like a machine now. They've taken over for Alabama, and I'm sure it was interesting last night watching on the set when David Pollack looked over straight in the eye to Nick Saban and said, hey, Georgia's taking over college football. They're the best program, blah, blah, blah. He had to sit there and listen to that. So he'll be motivated to try to answer that. I actually thought Alabama should have gotten into the Final Four. I was one of the few who thought that. But it is what it is, and they're the better team. And now they're going to lose, 10 to 15 more people in the NFL, and they'll just bring in more.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. They've got that pipeline. They just roll them in left and right. I got to ask you about the Steelers and how they finished, because they end up 9-8. So what was your thought in watching how this team, which ends up 9-8 because of the miracle on opening day against Cincinnati, and ends up where they are? What'd you think?
Well, for me, anytime they don't get in the playoffs, it's not a successful season. That doesn't mean they made bad use of some of the stuff they had going on. I think it's difficult to always transition from a franchise Hall of Fame quarterback to who knows what. And they were put in that position, Steve. But I think they probably minimized their downtime in terms of finding the next guy. And I'm not suggesting that Kenny Pickett could be a franchise quarterback, but he certainly could be a functional one for them and somebody who can win a lot of games. And I think we saw that as the year went on. His stats aren't going to overblow you. But the fact that he got in there midseason and then played, and I thought if you really look inside the numbers on third down, he was really good in those critical downs, those weighty downs that you need to make plays on, or else the drive's over. So they got a jump start on their next quarterback, where a lot of teams could have taken Kenny Pickett. Nobody took any quarterback until the third round, and the Steelers were the only ones. And so maybe you know how teams look forever to find their next quarterback. You look at Indianapolis, what they've done ever since Andrew Luck left there. That was a tough thing for them to go through because no one thought that was coming. But then they've tried quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, and who knows where they're going to be next year with their quarterback situation. They're not the only one. So I think this year will be looked at as a building block to next year. And if next year turns into a playoff season, which I think it could, although they're in a tough division, I think you'll look back and say this was turns out to be a pretty good year for this young group on offense.
It looked as the season was going. I always felt like he had a pretty good sync with Pat Freiermuth, but it looked like as the season went, he was getting into better sync with George Pickens. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah, totally. I think both those guys are going to be very important to Kenny Pickett and the Steelers' offense. Pickens is the sure-handed guy who's made a lot of plays already, and I think he is trending upward to be the number one receiver here. I know Deontay Johnson signed a deal in this offseason, but he had a very strange year in that he never scored a touchdown despite 86 receptions and 147 targets. That's a lot not to get in the end zone. It's not all his fault either. I mean, they went through two quarterbacks, at times not sure how that was going to – it looked like a restrictive play calling on the quarterbacks early on, and it may have certainly hurt because they only had 12 passing touchdowns all year for a team. So, that's unacceptable. That's got to get better. But I think the experience that all these guys got this year should help them. It's hard to predict the NFL, as you know, because you never know what you're going to see. Who would have thought the Rams would go 5-12?
All right. Well, whoever thought Skylar Thompson would be playing a game to get him into the playoffs either. And
Brock Purdy would be your offensive rookie of the year, perhaps.
Yeah. Exactly. So when you look at the defense, Minka ended up being the team MVP. What did you think of his performance? And what does T.J. Watt need to do? I mean, to me, it just seems like he just needs to stay on the field because when he's on the field, it changes everything.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, it has an effect on everyone. I think we saw that when he wasn't on the field. They were 1-6 without him, 8-2 with him, and not that it's always his play that makes the difference, but what it does is it makes offenses really target him and try to minimize him. And in doing so, you open up opportunities for others. Alex Highsmith had 14.5 sacks very quietly, and that's a tremendous. He led the league in forced fumbles, and he didn't even get a Pro Bowl selection. Well, he's going to be due to get a contract at the end of next year, or if they decide to do it sooner, it's going to cost him some money. So, Watt being healthy, generally all of those guys not missing large chunks of time is important to their defense. But who knows? You can never tell how that's going to be. Their offensive line this year, Steve, never missed a game. All 5 guys played every single start. That's unusual, but that does not mean that they shouldn't address it. They need to come up with better players and increase the depth in that position.
All right. That means, of course, it could be free agency they do it, or they could do it through the draft, which then brings up the draft. How amazed are you that the Steelers got a second-round pick from the Bears for Chase Claypool?
Well, stunned. I was stunned when it happened, just because I didn't. First of all, I thought Claypool would have a good year. This was a money year for him. This is going to be a contract year for him. It came off a bad year last year based on what we saw in his rookie season, and I thought this would be a jump back. I'm going to show you that I'm more of what you saw in my first year as opposed to what you saw in my second year. And it turned out to be none of it. And so they soured on him. They traded him. Who would have thought a second-round pick? Normally, draft capital, unless you're a really, really good player with some resume, you're not going to get a second-round pick. And they did, and essentially it's turned into a first-round pick because it's number 32 overall. That's like a late first-round pick. So they're going to have, 3 of the first 40, 4 of the first 80. If they cash in on those guys and they come in and play immediately, because more and more rookies are doing that, all of a sudden it could change the dynamics of your team. So it's very important, and it's the first draft for Omar Khan as the general manager, and Andy Weidel, who's the assistant GM after Kevin Colbert, left them with a pretty good draft class from this past season.
How did the fans react to watching the Steeler team play this year? How did they react in terms of voice and how, just talking to them in the street, and how did they react in terms of being in the seats?
Well, you do a talk show, you know how it goes. I do a talk show here. I know how it goes. People are never happy, no matter what. No, I'm sure with Penn State fans, you're going to get the people who always want more. Everyone always wants more. But it's a very competitive league, and it's very difficult to be on top. Now, while they didn't have a losing season, they certainly fell short of their goals again. And I think most of the criticism has been on the offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. And yesterday, I was of the belief they'd probably make a change with him. But yesterday I got the feeling after listening to Mike Tomlin that maybe they won't do that. He has a year left on a contract, so maybe they're going to let him play that contract out. Maybe not. I think sometimes these decisions make a week after the end of the season, and we'll see. But, most of the criticism went in his direction because, quite frankly, they didn't score enough points. They averaged 18 a game, and that includes, only one time going over 30. So in the NFL quick strike league, you need more big plays, more big offense. We did not see that from them. Now, could it be because they were going through a quarterback transition? I think that has a lot to do with it. Next year will be a better indication, but the question is, will he be here to go through that next year?
All right, exactly. It's a 17-game season now, and you and I both know, Bob, they want to go to 18 games. That's, the NFL knows where the money is. But the attrition rate is, are you amazed? I doubt you're amazed by the attrition rate because of how physical the league is. But what about the product, and what does it look like after Thanksgiving compared to what it looks like in October?
Well, all you have to do is look at the Miami and Jets game that the Steelers needed the Jets to win and see Joe Flacco versus Skylar Thompson. That's all you need to do. And you look down at some of these other teams with these quarterbacks who are banged up, and Mike White is somebody they wanted in New York because Zach Wilson wasn't doing it. It is tough. There's a lot of injuries in place, and you end up, and that's why I think, Steve, these guys protect the quarterback so much. But also in doing that, you open up so much subjectivity on what is a roughing the passer call and what isn't. And you want to protect, sure, but you can't take away some of the abilities of these defensive players to make play. Cam Hayward got called for a roughing this week, and I couldn't believe it. All he did was tackle Deshaun Watson.
Exactly.
Because he, flung him around, it was viewed as roughing. But, I'm sorry. It's a delicate line to walk, but I understand what the league is trying to do. They want to keep their star players in the games so that they don't have Skylar Thompson versus Joe Flacco at the end of the year.
Well, they did that, but they still ended up with Skylar Thompson against Joe Flacco at the end of the year.
And that's your point.
and I got to ask you about Lamar Jackson for a moment, because this is 2 straight years where the last 5.5 games he's not a factor, and his contract's up, and he is his own agent. What do you think the Ravens should do, and what do you think will happen?
Well, he's his own agent, and that's, I don't know. You save money, but you may cost yourself money too. I don't know. But then again, this is a league where all those numbers are out there. He knows where he would fit in. I'm sure he's looking at Deshaun Watson's contract and saying, I'm better than that. I won an MVP. I deserve at least that. So I don't think you need an agent to tell you that. But you do need an agent for some other things as well. Pardon the phone, it just went off here. So, but I think my guess would be that he's going to be franchised because they won't be able to make a deal that's suitable to the Ravens. I think they'd want to get a deal done, but the numbers will be different. And when they're different, it normally means there's an impasse. And they do have 2 years to franchise if they want to do it. So he won't like it, but he's going to make a whole bunch of money in 1 year if that's the case. But I think that's where we are with that. My guess would be he's going to be franchised.
Great point. Bob, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much. Get that phone. Take care of it. And when you do
sorry
talk to him...
Sorry about the distractions, Steve. It's always great to talk to you.
No, Bob, tell him I said hi.
All right. Will do. They'll be honored.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
All right. See ya.